Thank you for joining us for a conversation with our leader in Tampa, St. Pete, Hannah McManus. She is our expert in that market as well as the Central Florida area and markets beyond. Hannah, thank you for joining us today. To start off our conversation, tell us about the latest and greatest for Tampa, St. Pete. What are you seeing there in that market in terms of occupancy and rate and overall trends in our hotel sector?
Thanks so much for including me on this conversation. In terms of where the market is now, we're no longer in a surge phase. We really saw a pretty significant surge in demand within that post-pandemic range. So 2020 through about 2023, 2024, we saw astronomical growth in our region. And that was led by new supply additions, high quality new supply additions, and just an in-migration of new residents, new groups coming to our market for the first time, a resurgence in some leisure coming into our market. So really unprecedented growth that we saw, particularly in terms of rate growth in the region. So where we are now is we're in a stabilization phase, but stabilization in Tampa Bay still looks great. So it's exciting to see that some of the kind of intense demand fundamentals that we saw in that post-pandemic period are starting to moderate and giving some of our hotel operators even a chance to catch their breath and sort of catch up. But ultimately, that stabilization in this market looks wonderful. Occupancy is certainly starting to normalize a bit, but rate growth remains really strong. And that's certainly what our operators want to see. And I would think a lot of that rate that we're seeing is coming from some of our new supply, some of our high quality new supply that has entered into this market, particularly in our downtown sectors in both St. Pete and Tampa within the last couple of years. So our rate floor has risen, and as a result, that our hotels in all the different segments, not just that high quality full service that we saw enter the market, but our select service hotels and our limited as well, are seeing an opportunity to keep those rates high, even as our occupancy normalizes.
Great. Those are some fantastic insights. Thank you. What about in the realm of new supply and development?
Well, I would say our pipeline is slowing modestly. There's a little bit of natural slowing in that pipeline with the rising construction costs and financing constraints that we're seeing. But I would think that's sort of that's comparable to what we're seeing on a national scale. So I don't think that's unique to Tampa. We're also seeing some really smart infill and not so much like reckless expansion of supply that's been concentrated in our downtown core, and really, a lot of lifestyle driven product that's capturing a really healthy mix of both our leisure travelers and our meeting and group travelers. I think one thing that was really remarkable for Tampa in the post-pandemic period is we had a lot of meetings and groups discover us for the first time as sort of a welcome change from some of the more popular and also more expensive markets of, say, South Florida. So we welcomed a lot of new groups into our market and have been able to capture a lot of capture their attention and capture that repeat business in the last couple of years. So that's really supported our growth. And I think our developers are recognizing that and are now some of that, like I said, instead of that smart infill that we're seeing is hotels designed for both those leisure and those meeting and group travelers. So in St. Petersburg downtown, an Autograph property is underway. It's part of a really interesting mixed use project that will also have some office tenants, some parking for downtown users. And then we can't talk about Tampa Bay new supply without, of course, mentioning the Pendry. The Pendry is a pretty big deal for us. We have our second really true luxury product coming into the market in this decade, which is wonderful. We had the Edition open just a few years ago, and now we're also seeing the Pendry. And both the Edition and Pendry products have a residential component attached to them. So seeing that higher quality branded residential coming in as part of our hotel development is just really exciting. There is a redevelopment project of a historic cigar factory that's happening as well in the not quite the downtown Tampa submarket, but East Tampa. So we're really excited to see that historic projects come online. And then while there isn't as much dirt moving as we're used to seeing, given, like I said, some of those constraints and new development that we're experiencing, not just here, but nationally, I would say there's been consistent interest from our developer. We certainly have lots of asks, and we're hearing in the market of different developers that are still interested in and perhaps starting some establishing some roots here in the Tampa Bay region. So while our pipeline is temporarily a little bit slower than we've seen in the past few years, I think we're in that same way that we're seeing market stabilization. I think we're seeing a bit of a stabilized pipeline, but I do expect consistent new supply over the next couple of years.
With all that activity and as you describe it, stabilization in the market, I would imagine there are some transactions that are occurring or have recently occurred. What are you seeing in the realm of transactions there in Tampa St. Pete?
So in terms of transactions that I've been keeping an eye on in Tampa Bay, I will say we've seen a bit of a slowdown in our transaction velocity. A lot of that I've been hearing is due to interest rate volatility. But again, in the same way developers have their eye on the Tampa Bay region, investors still certainly seem to be very interested in our region. So 2023 was kind of a banner year for transaction activity. Seen a bit of a slowdown in 24 and 25. Some of the hotels of note that I saw trade last year would have been the Residence Inn in downtown Tampa, adjacent to the airport. We saw the Hampton trade in the Channel District. A Home2 had a very healthy sale in the Brandon area of Tampa, that Brandon submarket. But one thing I've certainly been keeping an eye on, there's a pending transaction right now for the Hilton Bayfront in downtown St. Pete that's looking to be acquired by the Coulter Group. And it's not conclusive what will happen with that property, whether it remain a hotel or convert to an alternate use, but it's a pretty significant sale of a bit of a banner asset, a trophy asset, if you will, on our St. Pete waterfront. So it'll be interesting to see what becomes of that site.
Great. And just any final thoughts or takeaways for our listeners to kind of pay most attention to for Tampa St. Pete?
I think the thing to remember about the Tampa Bay market is that right now we don't expect any more explosive growth. We saw that explosive growth really happen in that post-pandemic period. We've certainly, thrived during that time, and now we're starting to see, I would say, durable growth. So I don't anticipate any sort of dramatic slowdown. I think occupancy, we're going to see some stabilization, but I do think rate growth will continue, maybe not at the double-digit gains that we saw in that 22-23 period, but certainly durable growth of rate. I think new supply absorption will be key, especially in our downtown market. But I expect absorption to happen fairly rapidly, given that there's continued interest from our users, our leisure travelers, from our meeting and group users, and that continued in-migration of residents. Like I said, Tampa is just becoming a hotbed of activity for new office users, for new residents, for a variety of folks coming to our market. And I think that will also really support and sustain that long-term demand. So I think the key takeaway here is that that period of dramatic growth is behind us, but we anticipate, and I certainly anticipate, durable growth going forward.
Wonderful. Hannah, thank you so much for being with us today. That is some great intel and insight on Tampa St. Pete. For those of you that want to learn more or connect with Hannah one-on-one, this is her contact information. She'd be more than willing to chat with you, answer your questions, and help you if you're ever in need of consulting services in that part of the country. Thanks so much for listening.